They say a mother's intuition is a gift from God. I didn't want to believe mine. I was standing in my kitchen in Asheville, North Carolina, just 3 days ago, Easter Sunday. The sun was hitting the countertops. The smell of honey-glazed ham and slow-simmered green beans filled the air. It should have been a day of peace, but my son Michael, he was acting strange. He kept watching me, not the way a son looks at a mother he loves. He was watching me like a hawk watches a field mouse, waiting, tracing my every move. "Mom," he said, his voice was too soft, too sweet, like syrup covering a bitter pill. "Did you forget to turn the coffee pot off again?" I saw smoke. I looked at the machine. It was unplugged. I had unplugged it an hour ago. I knew I had. "Michael, it's off," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart, it started that slow, heavy thumping in my chest. He sighed. A loud, theatrical sigh. He looked over at his wife, Letitia. She was leaning against my refrigerator, picking at her manicure. She didn't look up. She just nodded, as if they had already discussed this, as if I was already gone. "I am Mildred Smith. I am 72 years old. I have lived in this house for 44 years. I raised 3 children here. I buried my parents from here. And my husband, Martin, he was out on the porch right then, oblivious. He was laughing with our other children, Sarah and David. He didn't see the trap being laid in the kitchen. He didn't see the way Michael was looking at our mahogany dining table, like he was already measuring it for a moving van. "You're tired, Mildred," Letitia said. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold. "The house is too big. The stairs, the confusion. That was the word they started using 6 months ago. If I misplaced my glasses, confusion. If I forgot the name of a new actor on a TV show, confusion. If I disagreed with Michael about his gambling debts, well, then I was having an episode. I stood my ground. I smoothed my apron. The lace was scratchy against my fingers. I am not confused, Letitia. I am busy. There are 22 people coming for dinner." "Exactly," Michael snapped. He stepped closer. He smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. "It's too much for you. We've made an executive decision. For your own good. For my own good." Those 4 words are the most dangerous words a child can say to a parent. They think because we have gray hair, we have gray matter. They think because our joints ache, our minds have quit. They are wrong. I looked out the window at the lilac bushes Martin planted when Sarah was born. They were in full bloom, deep purple, vibrant. I realized then that Michael wasn't there for the ham. He wasn't there for the resurrection. He was there for the deed. "We're going to talk about it at dinner," Michael said. He patted my hand. His skin felt oily. "The whole family needs to be on the same page about your condition, my condition." I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. I looked at the spice rack. I looked at the clock. I looked at the calendar. Everything was in its place. Except my son. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I knew about the credit card bills he was hiding from Letitia. I wanted to tell him I knew he'd been calling my bank, pretending to be my assistant. But I didn't. I just smiled the way a mother smiles when she's watching a toddler stumble. "Fine, Michael," I whispered. "Let's have a talk at dinner." I walked past him. I went to my bedroom. I locked the door. I reached under my mattress. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. It didn't have a return address. It didn't have a flashy logo, but inside those pages was a truth that would stop Michael's heart. I had been to Charlotte. I had seen Dr. Aris. I had taken the tests, the memory tests, the blood work, the brain scans. Michael thought he was the only one playing a game. He forgot who taught him how to play. I tucked the envelope into my knitting bag. Right under the half-finished sweater for my granddaughter, I checked my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were sharp. My hands were as still as a mountain lake. "Mildred," Martin called from the hallway. "The guests are pulling up." "You okay, honey?" I opened the door. I kissed my husband on the cheek. He smelled like peppermint and sunshine. "I'm wonderful, Martin," I said, and I meant it, because for the first time in a year, I wasn't the one who should be afraid. We walked out to the backyard. The tables were set with the white linen cloths, the ones I bleached myself. Sarah was laughing. The grandkids were hunting for eggs in the tall grass near the creek. It looked like a postcard of an American family. But at the head of the table, Michael was standing. He had a folder in his hand. He was tapping it against his thigh. He looked at me and winked, a wink that said, "It's over, old woman." I sat down. I smoothed the napkin over my lap. I felt the hard edge of the neurologist's report through the yarn in my bag. The guests began to sit. The noise of chairs scraping against the wooden deck was loud, like a drum roll. Michael cleared his throat. He clinked his glass with a spoon. The sound was sharp, piercing. "Before we eat," Michael began. He looked around the table at his siblings. He looked at the neighbors. He looked at his father. "We need to discuss Mom. We need to discuss her safety. And we need to discuss where she's going to be living, starting Monday." The silence that followed was heavy. A bird chirped in the distance. I saw Sarah's fork drop. I saw David's face go pale, but I just reached for my knitting bag. "Go on, Michael," I said. My voice carried across the yard, clear as a bell. "Tell them everything you think you know." The trap was sprung, but Michael didn't realize he was the one inside it. The steam from the green bean casserole rose up between us. It felt like a curtain, a heavy, wet curtain, separating the woman I used to be from the woman they wanted me to be. 24 people, my neighbors, the Millers, my bridge partner, Mrs. Gable, my children, my grandchildren. All of them frozen, holding their forks midair. Michael stood at the head of the table. He straightened his silk tie. He looked like a man about to give a eulogy. Except I wasn't dead. Family, Michael began. His voice was thick with fake emotion. Friends, this is hard for me. It's hard for all of us. He looked at my husband, Martin. Martin was squinting at him. Confused, his hand was resting on mine. I could feel him trembling just a little bit. Michael, Martin asked. His voice was raspy. What are you talking about, son? Let's eat. The food is getting cold. Michael ignored him. He turned his gaze back to the crowd. He didn't look at me. He looked over me, like I was a piece of furniture that had started to rot. We've been watching Mom for a year, Michael said. The episodes, the wandering, the way she forgets her own address. I felt a spark in my...
It's okay, Michael. They need to know it's a safety issue. Last week, Mildred, remember? You left the iron on for 4 hours. The house almost burned down.
I didn't blink. I didn't move. I don't own an iron, Letitia, I said. My voice was quiet. I haven't used an iron since 2012. I use a steamer. Letitia's eyes flickered. Just for a second.
See, that's what we mean. The delusions, she doesn't even remember the iron. It's stage 3, everyone. Dr. Higgins, he's been very clear. Rapid onset, severe dementia.
Sarah, my youngest, gasped. She leaned across the table. Her face was...
Michael, why didn't you tell us? Is it really that bad? Mom, are you okay?
I looked at Sarah. My baby. I saw the tears forming in her eyes. She believed them. Because why wouldn't she?
It's worse than she let on, Sarah. We've already signed the preliminary papers, the Pines. It's a secure memory care unit in Hendersonville. We're moving her in tomorrow morning. We've already listed the house. We have a buyer, cash.
The table exploded. David, my middle son, stood up so fast his chair hit the deck board.
Monday, you're moving her Monday, without a family meeting, without a second opinion.
There's no time, David. The debt. I mean, the care costs are astronomical. We have to sell the estate to pay for her treatment. It's what's best for her. Ask Dad. Dad, tell them.
Every eye turned to Martin. My husband. The man I've shared a bed with for 50 years. He looked like a deer in the headlights. Michael had been whispering in his ear for weeks. Telling him I was sick. Telling him I would get lost.
Michael says it's for her safety, David. I don't want her getting hurt. I don't want her to suffer.
Michael's smile was triumphant. He reached into his folder. He pulled out a stack of papers. The power of attorney. The commitment papers.
I've got the notary coming at 6. We just need to finalize the signatures. It's for the best, Mom. You'll have a nice room, a window. You can look at the birds.
He was talking to me like I was a parakeet. I felt the knitting bag against my leg. The blue folder was cold and heavy. Michael, I said. The table went silent. Dead silent, even the grandkids stopped whispering. You mentioned Dr. Higgins, I continued, the one you play golf with every Saturday. Michael cleared his throat. He's a respected physician, Mom. He's seen the charts. He hasn't seen my charts, I said. I stood up. I am 5'3", but in that moment, I felt 10 feet tall. I felt the strength of every woman who has ever been talked over. Every grandmother who has been treated like a burden. Every mother who has been sold out for a mortgage payment. Michael, Letitia, sit down. They didn't move. They looked at me with that medical look. That we know what's best for the poor thing look. I said, sit down. They sat, reflex, the way a child obeys a teacher. I reached into my bag. I didn't rush. I let the tension build. I let the neighbors see the folder. I let Sarah see the logo on the front. You see, Michael, I said, I knew you were talking to Dr. Higgins. I knew you were telling the neighbors I was slipping. I even knew you were looking at my bank statements. Michael's face started to turn a strange shade of gray. His eyes darted to the blue folder. So I took a little trip, I whispered. To Charlotte, to a real specialist, a neurologist who doesn't play golf, a man who specializes in finding the truth. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first page, the report from Dr. Aris.
Subject Mildred Smith, 72, full cognitive battery completed, score 30 out of 30, no signs of neurodegeneration. Brain activity is in the top 5% for her age group. Conclusion. The patient is of sound mind, fully capable of self-governance and
It started small, a set of keys, my spare set, the ones I kept in the ceramic bird by the back door. One morning they were just gone. I looked everywhere. I checked the bird. I checked the junk drawer. I checked the pockets of my Sunday coat. Nothing. Then Michael walked in. He didn't knock. He never knocks anymore. He had the keys in his hand. He was shaking his head, that slow, pitying waggle that makes my blood boil. Mom, he said, you left these in the freezer next to the frozen peas. I stared at him. I knew I hadn't been to the freezer. I hadn't even opened it that morning. I like my oatmeal hot, but there he was, holding cold keys. I didn't put them there, Michael, I said. Are you sure? His voice was like velvet. Maybe you just forgot. It happens at your age. At your age, that was the seed. He planted it right there in my kitchen, and for a month, I let it grow. I started doubting myself. I started checking the stove 3 times. I started writing down the time I took my vitamins. Then came the forgotten phone calls. Letitia would call me at 10 in the morning. She'd talk about the weather. She'd ask about my roses, standard daughter-in-law talk, but then at dinner, Michael would bring up a doctor's appointment. Why didn't you go to the dentist, Mom? Letitia told you about it this morning. She didn't mention the dentist, Michael, Letitia would gasp. She'd put her hand over her heart. Mildred, we talked for 10 minutes about it. I even gave you the address. Don't you remember? I would look at Martin, my husband. He's a good man, a loyal man, but he's 75. His hearing isn't what it used to be, and he trusts his son. Maybe you missed it, honey, Martin would say. Michael just wants to help. That word became a cage. They started showing up unannounced to check on things. They moved my furniture. For your safety, they said. They took away my scatter rugs. Tripping hazards, they said. They even tried to take my car keys. The traffic in Asheville is getting too fast for you, Mom. I felt like I was being erased. One rug at a time, one memory at a time. I felt small. I felt old, but then I found the brochure. It was October, a Tuesday. Michael had left his leather briefcase on my dining table while he went to the hardware store with Martin. I shouldn't have looked. I'm a lady. I was raised to respect privacy, but my intuition, it was screaming. I opened the flap. Right on top was a glossy folder, The Pines, Luxury Memory Care and Assisted Living. There were circles around the prices. $6,000 a month, $7,000 for the advanced wing, and then a sticky note in Michael's handwriting. House sale covers 5 years. Estate goes to him after. My heart stopped. Michael, he wasn't worried about my safety. He was counting my money. He was waiting for me to slip enough so he could take the deed. I sat down in my rocker. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, looking at my lilacs. Looking at the house I'd built with my own sweat. I realized then, Michael had been the one moving my keys. He had been the one telling Letitia to lie about the phone calls. He was gaslighting me, my own son. Was trying to drive me crazy so he could get his hands on his inheritance early. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. It was like a stone, unbreakable. I knew our local doctor, Dr. Higgins, was Michael's friend. They played golf at the country club. If I went to Higgins, he'd just tell Michael I was unstable. I had to be smarter. I had to go underground. I waited until Michael and Martin went on their annual fishing trip to the coast. 3 days, that was my window. I told the neighbors I was visiting a friend in Black Mountain. Instead, I took the bus, the Greyhound, all the way to Charlotte, 2 hours of bumps and diesel fumes. I didn't tell a soul, not even Sarah. Especially not Martin. I couldn't risk him letting it slip to Michael over a beer. I found Dr. Aris online, at a library computer. I looked for the man with the most degrees, the man who didn't live in our county, the man who didn't know the Smith family. I walked into that clinic in Charlotte. I looked the receptionist in the eye. I want every test you have, I said. I want the scans. I want the puzzles. I want the blood work. Is this for an insurance claim, Mrs. Smith? No, I told her. It's for my life. I spent 2 days in that city. I stayed in a cheap motel near the hospital. I ate crackers and cheese for dinner. I felt like a spy at 72. I was a secret agent in my own family war. Dr. Aris was a young man, serious, kind. He didn't talk down to me. He didn't call me honey or sweetie. He looked at the results on his computer screen. He looked at me. Mrs. Smith, he said, your cognitive scores are remarkable. You have the mental processing speed of someone 20 years younger. I let out a breath I'd been holding for a year. So, I'm not crazy, far from it, he smiled. Why would you think that? Because my son told me I was, I whispered. He went quiet. He looked at the scans. He looked at my steady hands. Do you want me to call him? No, I said. I want you to mail the report to a P.O. box in Asheville. I didn't want him to know, not yet. I wanted him to think he was winning. I wanted him to keep moving my keys. I wanted him to keep telling his lies at the Piggly Wiggly, because I was building a case, and I knew Easter was coming. Easter is a time for resurrection, a time for things to come out of the dark and into the light. I spent the next few months playing the part. I let him help me cross the street. I let Letitia remind me of things. I acted a little slower, a little more confused. It was the hardest acting job of my life. Every time he patted my hand, I wanted to slap his. Every time he spoke to me like a child, I wanted to scream my IQ score in his face, but I waited. I watched the mail. I watched his debts grow. I saw the final notice letters in his trash. I saw him looking at my jewelry box. He thought he was the hunter. He thought I was the trophy. He was wrong. I was the trap. Tight against the cold draft coming from the window as we rattled toward Charlotte. The seats smelled like stale coffee and old upholstery. The man sitting 3 rows ahead of me was snoring. I didn't care about the smell or the noise. I was a ghost. For 44 years, I had been Mildred, the woman who remembered every birthday. The woman who never missed a Sunday service at the Methodist church. The woman who always had a batch of peanut butter cookies waiting in the jar, but that woman was gone for the weekend. I was someone else now. I was a woman fighting for her soul. I had told Martin I was going to stay with my old friend Martha in Black Mountain. I felt a pang of guilt when I kissed his cheek goodbye. His skin felt like parchment paper. He looked at me with so much trust. Have a good rest, Millie, he'd said. You've been so tired lately. Michael says the mountain air will do you wonders. Michael again, always Michael. I had reached into my purse and touched the cash I'd hidden in the lining, $2,000. I had been withdrawing it $50 at a time for 6 months. I didn't use the ATM. I went inside the bank and spoke to the teller, Mary. She's known me since she was in pigtails. Just some grocery money, Mary, I'd say. She never asked why I needed $50 3 times a week. When I got to Charlotte, I didn't go to a fancy hotel. I went to a small office building on the edge of town. The sign on the door said Henderson Investigations. It wasn't like the movies. There was no smoke. There was no jazz music. Just a beige room and a man named Bill Henderson who looked like he'd rather be fishing. He offered me a seat. He looked at my sensible shoes. He looked at my pearl earrings. How can I help you, Mrs. Smith? I need to know where my son's money is going, I said. My voice didn't shake. I gave him Michael's name. I gave him Michael's address in Raleigh. I gave him the name of Michael's investment firm. Bill Henderson leaned back in his chair. The springs groaned under his weight. That's a lot of information for a Saturday morning. I'm a mother, Mr. Henderson. I notice things. I noticed the new Mercedes he bought while he's asking me for help with his mortgage. I noticed the way his wife hides her shopping bags when I pull into their driveway. He nodded. It'll take a few weeks, background checks. Property records, maybe some, surveillance. Do whatever you have to do, I told him. I'll pay your retainer in cash. I handed him the envelope. He didn't count it. He just set it on the desk. You're a tough lady, Mrs. Smith. No, I whispered. I'm a mother who's been pushed too far. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I went back to Asheville. I went back to the kitchen. I went back to the episodes. One afternoon, Michael came over while I was folding laundry. He stood in the doorway. He was watching me fold Martin's undershirts. Mom, you're doing that twice. You already folded those. I looked at the basket. I knew I hadn't folded them yet. I had just taken them out of the dryer, but I let my hands drop. I let my shoulders slump. Oh, I said. I made my voice sound thin, frail. I guess I did. I'm sorry, Michael. My head is just a bit foggy today. The look of pure, cold joy that flashed across his face. It nearly made me sick. He didn't want me to be well. He wanted me to be failing. It's okay, Mom, he said. He stepped into the room and patted my arm. That's why we're looking at the Pines. They have people to do the laundry for you. You won't have to worry about a thing. I looked at him. I really looked at him. This was the boy I'd stayed up with when he had the croup. This was the boy I'd cheered for at every baseball game. This was the boy I'd loved with every ounce of my being. How did he become a man who wanted to lock his mother in a room? The answer came on a Thursday, in a plain white envelope at my P.O. box. I drove to the park. I sat in my car under an oak tree. I opened the report from Bill Henderson. It wasn't just a mortgage issue. It was a disaster. Michael had invested in a real estate development in Florida, Sunny Palms. He'd used his own house as collateral. He'd used his kids' college funds, but the developer had vanished in June. The project was a swamp, literally. Michael was $200,000 in the hole. The bank was 48 hours away from foreclosing on his house in Raleigh. He was drowning, and my house, my beautiful paid-off home in Asheville, was his life jacket. He didn't want me to have dementia because he was worried. He wanted me to have dementia because he needed a judge to grant him emergency power of attorney. He needed to sell my house to save his skin. I sat there for an hour. The sun moved across the dashboard. The birds were singing in the trees. I felt a strange kind of peace. The confusion was gone. The fogginess was gone. Everything was crystal clear. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a witness. I drove to the stationery store. I bought the thickest, bluest folder they had. I went home and I put the doctor's report from Charlotte in the front. I put Bill Henderson's financial report in the back. And then I waited. I cooked the Easter ham. I dyed the eggs with the grandkids. I let Letitia tell me I'd forgotten to salt the potatoes. I let them think they were winning. I let Michael prepare his announcement because I knew something he didn't. Easter is about the truth coming out of the tomb, and on Sunday, I was going to roll the stone away. I looked at Martin that night as we lay in bed. He was already asleep. His breathing was soft, steady. "I'm sorry I had to keep this from you, Martin," I whispered into the dark, "but I'm doing this for us." I reached out and touched the knitting bag on the floor. I could feel the edge of the blue folder. Tomorrow was Easter tomorrow. The whispers would stop, and the truth would begin. The sun was high over Asheville. The patio was a sea of pastel dresses and the clinking of iced tea glasses. I sat at the head of the long wooden table. Martin was to my right, picking at his potato salad. Michael sat at the far end. The authority seat. He had a leather folder resting next to his plate. He hadn't touched his ham. He was too busy looking at the neighbors, making sure everyone was paying attention. "Everything all right, Michael?" I asked. I kept my voice light, airy, like a woman who couldn't remember where she put her shoes. "Just thinking, Mom," he said. He gave Letitia a sharp nod. The signal. Suddenly, Michael stood up. He tapped his spoon against his crystal glass. The conversation died down. Even the grandkids stopped hunting for eggs in the yard. "Everyone," Michael said. He practiced his sad face, the one he'd probably rehearsed in the mirror for an hour. "I have something difficult to share. It's about Mom." I felt Sarah's hand go tight on her napkin. I saw David lean forward, his brow furrowed. They didn't know. They were about to be hit by a freight train of lies. "As many of you have noticed," Michael continued, "Mildred has been struggling, the confusion, the safety risks. It's reached a point where we can no longer look the other way." He opened his leather folder. He pulled out a document with a generic medical header. "I've consulted with specialists. The diagnosis is stage 3 Alzheimer's. It's aggressive." A collective gasp went around the table. Mrs. Gable covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh, Mildred," she whispered. I didn't look at Mrs. Gable. I looked at my son. I looked at the veins standing out in his neck. He was sweating. "Because of this," Michael said, his voice rising, "we've made the executive decision to move Mom into the Pines tomorrow morning. It's a secure facility. Professional care, and to cover the costs, we've already accepted a cash offer on this house." The silence was deafening. It was the sound of a family being torn apart by a signature. "Monday," David shouted. "You're selling the house on Monday." "Michael, what the hell are you doing?" "I'm saving her life, David," Michael barked. "Dad can't handle her. Look at her. She doesn't even know what day it is." I took a slow sip of my tea. The mint was cool against my tongue. "Actually, Michael," I said, my voice wasn't thin anymore. It wasn't frail. It was a whip. The table went quiet again. Michael blinked. He looked at me like I'd just started speaking in tongues. "It's Easter Sunday," I said. "April 20th, it is precisely 2:15 in the afternoon, and you are a liar." I reached down into my knitting bag. I didn't faff about with the yarn. I pulled out the blue folder, the heavy one. I slid it across the table. It skidded over the white linen, stopping right in front of Michael's ham. "Open it," I whispered. "Mom, you're having an episode," Letitia interjected. She reached for the folder, trying to grab it before Michael could. "Let's just go inside and lie down, honey. Touch that folder, Letitia, and I will have you removed for trespassing," I said. I wasn't playing the sweet grandmother anymore. The mask was off. Michael looked at the folder. He saw the seal of the Charlotte Neurological Institute. His face went from gray to a sickly shade of white. "What is this?" he muttered. "That," I said, standing up slowly, "is a clean bill of health. From a doctor who doesn't play golf with you, Michael." I looked at the guests. I looked at my friends of 40 years. I spent 3 days in Charlotte. I took the tests. I took them all. My cognitive score is a 30 out of 30. I have no dementia. I have no episodes. "Then why were you forgetting things?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "Because Michael was moving my keys," I said. "Because Letitia was lying about phone calls. They were gaslighting me, Sarah. They were trying to make me think I was crazy, so they could steal this house." Michael tried to laugh. It was a hollow, desperate sound. "This is ridiculous. You're delusional, Dad, tell her." Tell her she's sick. But Martin wasn't looking at Michael. He was looking at the folder. He reached out and opened it. He started reading. But that's not all that's in there, I told the table. Turn to the back, Martin. Read the second report. Michael lunged for the folder then. He tried to snatch it from his father's hands, but David was faster. My middle son stood up and blocked Michael, his arms crossed over his chest. Let him read it, Michael, David growled. Martin turned the pages. His eyes scanned the financial records I'd gotten from the pie, the Florida development, the $200,000 debt. The foreclosure notice on Michael's own home. Martin looked up. His eyes were wet, but they were clear for the first time in months. You were going to sell our home to pay for a swamp in Florida? Dad, I can explain, Michael stuttered. The investment, it's going to turn around. I just needed a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back. With what? I asked. With the money you were stealing from my care fund? I walked around the table. I stood right in front of my eldest son. He looked small. He looked like the boy who used to hide his broken toys under the bed, but he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a predator. You sat at my table, I said. You ate my food. You kissed my cheek, and all the while, you were measuring me for a coffin. Mom, don't call me that, I snapped. A son protects his mother. He doesn't hunt her. I turned to Letitia. And you whispered in my husband's ear. You told him I was a burden. You tried to break a 50-year marriage for a new kitchen in Raleigh. We're leaving, Letitia said, grabbing her purse. Michael, let's go. She's unstable. Oh, you are leaving, I agreed. But not before the neighbors see exactly who you are. I picked up the neurologist's report. I held it high, like a trophy. I am Mildred Smith, I announced to the yard. I am 72 years old. My mind is sharp. My house is paid for, and I am not going anywhere. The neighbors started to clap, small at first, then louder. Mrs. Gable stood up and cheered. Michael didn't wait for the dessert. He didn't wait for the coffee. He grabbed his leather folder, his useless, lying folder, and he ran. Letitia was right behind him, her heels clicking frantically on the wood. I watched their car peel out of the driveway. I watched the dust settle. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Martin. He pulled me into him. He smelled like peppermint and regret. I'm so sorry, Millie, he whispered. I should have known. I should have seen him. It's okay, Martin, I said. I rested my head on his chest. The fog is gone now. I looked at Sarah and David. They were standing there, shell-shocked, but they were looking at me with new eyes, not with pity, but with respect. Well, I said, smoothing my apron. The ham is getting cold, and I believe we have a cake in the kitchen. I walked back to my seat, the head of the table, my seat. The truth was out. The stone was rolled away, and for the first time in a year, I could finally breathe. The aftermath of a storm is always the quietest part. The neighbors had gone home. The dishes were soaking in the sink. Sarah and David were sitting at the kitchen island, their faces pale in the soft glow of the overhead light. Martin was in his recliner, staring at the television, but it wasn't turned on. He was staring at his own reflection. I sat down across from my children. I didn't feel tired anymore.
Mom, I feel sick. How did we not see it? How did we let him talk to you like that for a year?
I reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cold. Because you're good people, Sarah, I said. Good people don't go looking.
It wasn't just him, Mom. It was Letitia. She was the one feeding the fire. She's the one who wanted the estate for her Florida lifestyle. I'm calling the lawyer in the morning. We need to strip Michael's name off everything. Now.
The kitchen door creaked open. It was Michael. He hadn't left the property. He had been sitting in his car in the driveway for an hour. He looked haggard. His tie was undone. His expensive shirt was wrinkled. He stood in the doorway, looking at us.
I just wanted to say, the papers, I tore them up. The Pines contract, it's gone.
David spun around, his fists clenched at his sides.
Oh, you tore them up? How noble of you, Michael. After you tried to kidnap our mother and steal her house, you're lucky I don't throw you off this porch right now.
David, please, I was desperate. The developers. They threatened to sue me. They were going to take everything. Letitia said. She said if we didn't get the money, she was leaving with the kids.
I stood up. I walked over to my eldest son. I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. So you chose her over me, I whispered. You chose a woman who would leave you, over the mother who would never have turned her back on you. Michael looked down at his shoes.
I thought I could fix it. I thought I'd move you in, sell the place, pay the debt. And then I'd make it up to you. I swear, Mom, I was going to buy you a condo in Raleigh, near us.
Don't you dare blame this all on me, Michael. You're the one who signed the papers. You're the one who moved the keys.
We all turned to look at her. She was standing there, clutching her designer purse like a
We were doing what was necessary. Look at her. She's 72. She shouldn't be in this big house anyway. We were just accelerating the process.
I walked toward Letitia. She stepped back, her heels clicking on the linoleum. Accelerating the process, I asked. You mean accelerating my death, because that's what happens to people my age when you take away their purpose. You lock them in a room with a
That's dramatic, Mildred.
No, I said. What's dramatic is the restraining order I'm filing on Monday morning. The room went.
Mom, a restraining order. You can't be serious. I'm your son.
I looked at him. I looked at the man I'd nurtured. A son is a title you earn, Michael, I said. And today, you lost it. You are no longer allowed on this property. You are no longer allowed to call your father, and you are.
Listen to your mother, Michael. Leave now before I call the sheriff. I've lived with this woman for 50 years. She's the smartest person I know. And you're a stranger to me.
Michael looked at his father. He saw the wall. The solid, unbreakable wall of a marriage he couldn't crack. He turned and walked out the door. Letitia followed, still muttering about ingratitude. The screen door slammed. The sound echoed through the house. Sarah came over and put her head on my shoulder. David sat back down, exhaling a breath he'd been holding for years. What now, Mom? David asked. I looked around my kitchen. My beautiful, bright, honest kitchen. Now, I said. Now we change the locks. And then we finish the pie. I believe there's a lemon meringue in the fridge that hasn't been touched. I walked to the refrigerator. I pulled out the pie. The crust was perfect. The meringue was high and toasted. I sliced it into 4 pieces. Not 5. 4. We sat at the island, the 4 of us. The real family. The ones who stayed. The house felt lighter. The shadows in the corners were gone. I took a bite of the lemon. It was tart. It was sweet. It tasted like victory. Monday morning in Asheville was crisp. The air smelled like damp pine needles and fresh starts. I stood on my front porch at 7 a.m. I watched Joe, the locksmith I'd known for 30 years, pack up his tools. All done, Mildred, Joe said. He handed me 4 silver keys. They felt heavy, cool, real. Nobody is getting in here without an invitation, Joe promised. He didn't ask why I was changing the locks on a Monday morning. He didn't ask why Michael wasn't there to help me. In a town like Asheville, news travels faster than a mountain breeze. I went inside. Martin was sitting at the kitchen table. He was holding his coffee mug with both hands. He looked older today. The betrayal had carved new lines around his mouth. He called 4 times this morning, Millie, Martin said. Who? Michael, did you answer? Martin shook his head. I listened to the messages. He's crying. He says the bank is at his door in Raleigh. He says Letitia is packing a suitcase. I pulled out a chair. I sat down across from my husband. I didn't feel the urge to rescue my son, that part of me. The part that always smoothed over the cracks. It had burned away at the Easter table. He chose his path, Martin, I said. He tried to trade our lives for a swamp in Florida. We can't fix that for him. I know, Martin whispered, but it hurts. It just hurts. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It hurts because you have a heart, Michael. He has a ledger. There's a difference. At 10 o'clock. Sarah arrived. She was wearing her business suit. She looked like the lawyer she was. She had a briefcase full of papers. We're going to Whitaker's office, Sarah said. I've already called ahead. He's the best estate attorney in North Carolina. He doesn't golf with Michael's friends. He doesn't even like golf. We drove downtown. The mountains were a deep, bruised blue against the sky. I felt awake. I felt sharp. Mr. Whitaker's office was quiet. It smelled like old books and expensive carpet. He was a man in his 80s. His eyes were like 2 bright marbles behind thick glasses. Mildred, he said, standing up to greet me, I heard about your Easter dinner, I must say. I haven't heard a story that's satisfying in 20 years. I'm glad it provided entertainment, Arthur, I said, but today I want protection. We sat down for 2 hours. We went through every document Michael had ever touched. The power of attorney revoked, the medical proxy canceled, the will torn up. I want everything split between Sarah and David, I told the lawyer. Equally, every penny, every stick of furniture. This house and Michael, Mr. Whitaker asked. Michael gets his life, I said. He's already spent his inheritance on Florida mud. I'm not giving him a second chance to bury me. I signed my name, Mildred Smith. The ink was dark, the letters were firm, no tremors, no hesitation. When we walked out of the office, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. I wasn't a patient anymore. I wasn't a subject for a memory care unit. I was the owner of my own life. We stopped at the Piggly Wiggly on the way home. I needed milk, I needed bread, I needed to show my face. The grocery store was quiet, but I felt the eyes. I saw Mrs. Higgins, the doctor's wife. Turn her cart down another aisle when she saw me. Good, let her run. I walked up to the deli counter. The girl behind the glass, a sweet thing named Jenny, looked at me with wide eyes. Miss Mildred, she whispered. My mama told me what happened. She said you stood up and showed everyone a secret report. She said you were like a judge in a movie. I smiled. I just told the truth, Jenny. It's a lot easier than keeping a lie. Well, Jenny said, sliding an extra slice of cheese into my bag. My mama says you're the talk of the church. She says everyone is checking their own bank accounts today. I paid for my groceries. I walked out to the car. The sun was warm on my neck. When I got home, David was there. He had a toolbox. He was installing a new security camera over the garage. Just in case, Mom, David said. I don't think he'll come back, but I want you to feel safe. I looked at my 2 children, Sarah with her legal mind, David with his protective heart. They were the real ones. They were the ones who didn't need to be bought. Thank you, David, I said. That evening, Martin and I sat on the back porch. The gazebo was glowing in the twilight. The lilacs were still blooming. What are we going to do with the extra room, Millie? Martin asked. The one we were saving for Michael's visits. I thought about it. I thought about the years I'd spent waiting for him to call. The years I'd spent hoping he'd be the son I wanted him to be. I think I'll make it a sewing room, I said. Or maybe a library, a place where I can keep all my books and my reports. Martin laughed, a real, deep belly laugh. It was the first time I'd heard it in a year. I like that, he said. A library for the smartest woman in Asheville. I leaned back in my chair. I watched a firefly blink in the grass. The house was secure. The money was safe. The truth was written in stone. Michael was in Raleigh, dealing with the consequences of his greed. Letitia was in the dark, looking for a way out, but here, under the stars in North Carolina, there was only peace. I wasn't fading away. I was just getting started. I am Mildred Smith. I closed my eyes. I listened to the crickets. I didn't have to check the stove. I didn't have to look for my keys. I knew exactly where they were. They were in my pocket, and I was staying put. It has been 1 month since that Sunday. 1 month of silence, the most beautiful, heavy, honest silence I have ever known. The lilacs in Asheville have faded now. The mountain laurel is starting to bloom along the ridges. I sit on my porch every morning at 6. I watch the fog roll off the Blue Ridge Mountains. I drink my coffee, hot, black, just the way I like it. I don't have to hide the coffee pot anymore. I don't have to wonder if I left the stove on. I know I didn't because I am the one who turned it off. Last Tuesday, a certified letter arrived from Raleigh. It wasn't for me, it was for Michael. It had been forwarded from his old address. I didn't open it, I didn't have to. The return address said Wake County Courthouse, bankruptcy. Sarah told me that Letitia finally left. She took the kids, she took the SUV. She took the designer bags that were bought with money Michael didn't have. She went to her sister's house in Charlotte. Michael is living in a 1-bedroom apartment near the highway. He's working at a car dealership, commission only. He calls Sarah every night, crying. He wants me to pay his legal fees. He wants me to be a mother and forgive his debts. I am being a mother, Michael. I am teaching you the most important lesson you ever missed, consequences. I don't hate him, I really don't. Hate takes too much energy. And at 72, I'm saving my energy for things that grow. Martin and I have been busy. We spent the last 2 weeks clearing out the Michael room. We took down the old trophies. We boxed up the posters from his college days. We gave the furniture to a local charity that helps women starting over. Now that room is mine. I painted the walls a soft, pale yellow. Like the sun through a screen door, I moved in my sewing machine. I moved in the rocking chair my grandmother gave me. I have a shelf for my books. And right in the center, on a small wooden stand, I kept that blue folder. It's not a weapon anymore, it's a certificate. Yesterday, I went to the Methodist church. I wore my favorite navy blue dress. The one Michael said made me look confused. I sat in the third pew, right where I've sat for 40 years. Mrs. Gable leaned over during the first hymn. Mildred, she whispered, you look younger. Are you using a new cream? I smiled at her. No, Martha, I said. I just stopped carrying people who were trying to bury me. She nodded. She squeezed my hand. I think half the women in that congregation went home and changed their passwords that afternoon. But I'm not just telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because I know you're watching. I know who you are. You're the woman who worked 30 years in the school system. You're the woman who raised 3 kids on a tight budget. You're the woman who saved her Social Security checks. You're the woman who loves her family, even when they don't deserve it. And I know what they're saying to you. Mom, you're getting forgetful. Mom, maybe you shouldn't drive at night. Mom, we think it's time to look at some options. Listen to me. If they are saying it because they love you, you will know. Love doesn't whisper behind your back. Love doesn't move your keys. Love doesn't look at your house like it's a pile of cash. But if they are saying it because they are greedy, fight back. Don't let them tell you that your mind is a dark room. Don't let them treat your life like a business transaction. You are the matriarch. You are the foundation. Without you, they wouldn't even have a table to sit at. Martin and I are leaving tomorrow. We bought an RV. A small one, just big enough for 2 people and a map of the coast. We're going to see the lighthouses in the Outer Banks. We're going to eat fried shrimp in a shack on the pier. We're going to stay up late and watch the tide come in. Are you sure you can handle the driving, Martin? I asked him this morning. He laughed. He